Friday, April 20th, we will have our presentation on Genentech, Your Commute Just Became Easier, given by Jessica Schure, Dan McCoy, and Nate Byerly.
Hi, everyone.
For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen, or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box, and we will be able to answer those at the end of the presentation during the question and answer session. Here's a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I would like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible. And as you can see, we have quite a few webcasts coming up in the next few months. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit www.utah-apa.org/webcasts and register for your webcast of choice. We also have some distance education webcasts that are up right now to help you get your ethics or law credits. These webcasts are available to view at www.utah-apa.org/webcast-archive, and then you can follow the instructions to log your distance education CM credits. You can also follow us on Twitter now at Planning Webcast, or like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on the Planning Webcast Series sponsored by chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM. Select today's date, which is Friday, April 20th, and then select today's webcast, which is Genentech, Your Commute Just Became Easier. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. We are also recording today's webcast, and it will be available along with a PDF of the presentation at www.utah-apa.org/webcast-archive. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, who will introduce our speakers, and that's Madhu Narayanasamy.
Thank you, Brittany. This is Madhu Narayanasamy from TDM Smith. I'll be the moderator for this session. And this session is brought to you from the Transportation Planning Division of the APA. Transportation Planning Division is the largest division with 1,200 members, and it's for members who are interested in transportation planning and any related subject areas. We provide planning resources, opportunities for networking, programs for AICP certification maintenance credits like this. We also conduct student paper competition every year. We encourage anybody who is not yet a member to get involved and become a member. The fees is just $25. And who are all members to get more involved with the division by, you can join a committee, contribute to our newsletter. You can also co-sponsor some webinars such as this one. We also have so much networking sessions going on. For any more details, you can look up apa-tpd.org, or you can find out Transportation Planning Division on the website. Today we will be talking about Genentech, Your Commute Become Faster. We have 3 speakers today, and the speakers are Jessica Schure. She's a principal at Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates. She's a skilled transportation planner, mainly specializing in assisting public and private clients to reduce trip generation, parking demand, and greenhouse emissions by encouraging various sustainable transportation practices. Jessica had been the lead transportation planner on several campus and medical center master plan projects, most recently in the later stages of San Francisco State University master plan development, as well as her ongoing involvement in Genentech. Jessica received master's degree in environmental science and earth science at Lund University, Sweden. And we have Daniel McCoy. He is the associate director of transportation at Genentech. Dan has worked in the commute benefits field for over 20 years and has over the years consulted for many Bay Area cities and firms, including Sun Microsystems and Pixar Animation Studios. He is developing commute benefit and related transportation services and systems. Dan currently participates on several committees and boards addressing traffic congestion and air quality issues. Dan received the degrees in business economics and environmental studies from UC Santa Barbara. And the other speaker is Nathan Byerly. He is the gRide outreach manager at Genentech and has been with Genentech's employee transportation group for last 4 years. Prior to that, he spent 5 years with Genentech's Facilities Planning Group, where he was involved in Genentech's Transportation and Facilities Master Plan. He graduated from Oregon State University in 1996 with a bachelor's degree in housing design and is currently working on an MBA with emphasis on marketing at Golden Gate University. So now I will let Jessica to start the presentation on the green tech.
Thank you, Nadu. It's great to be here today. We've really looked forward to making this presentation. I've worked with Dan and Nate over the last several years in figuring out how to continue improving their TDM program, and they've done an amazing job, and I'm really looking forward to having it presented today. Today we'll be talking about what TDM is, why an employer TDM program is important, and what general programs and outcomes can be. And then we'll go into the Genentech program where Nate and Dan and I will be talking about the master plan, the actual TDM program as it stands today, some information on the monitoring system, and also how the monitoring system has helped Genentech look at at the impact of the TDM program, and we'll also discuss next steps. But before we do that, I just want to see if we can do a first call. How did you, let's see, get to work today? And if you're many people in the office, do a quick show of hands to give us how you got to work today. So we have about 30% voted, and driving alone is a strong contendant here. So right now we're looking at 64% driving alone, 13% taking transit, 13% telecommuting or other, and biking and walking is getting up to about 7% here and 4% carpool. And I think this is a fairly typical mode split. Drive alone is actually fairly low, I would say, so it's good. We have a good set of organizations participating in the webinar today. Okay, let's see. So I will start with some background information on TDM, and first of all, what is TDM? So we're talking about transportation demand management and using strategies that more efficiently use our existing transportation resources, so we don't need to continue building our way out of our congestion problems. TDM emphasizes the movement of people and goods and not necessarily just focusing on the vehicular or car movements. It prioritizes efficient modes such as walking and biking and ride sharing, and it prioritizes travel based on value and the cost of each trip. And why would we establish an employer TDM program? TDM programs are often criticized for being too modest in scale to actually have an impact on travel patterns. And this is often because we have limited political, institutional, or community acceptance, and also finances that employers may have difficulties finding resources to invest in TDM programs. But at the employer level, a comprehensive TDM program can yield cumulative and synergistic benefits that lead to more significant outcomes. And for employees, it's a lot about the quality of life, and having the TDM program be part of the commuter benefits, or sorry, the employee benefits program. It provides cost savings to our consumers, and not only to car drivers, but to other modes as well. And it provides our employees with travel options. For employers, there are significant road and parking facility cost savings that can be made. Also, crash cost savings and accident reduction. If you have a big campus, for instance, that's a big issue. And you have a more efficient land use. And for the society, the biggest one is pollution and congestion reduction. One thing that influences how successful a TDM program can be are parking requirements, and we have them all over, minimum parking requirements. And a typical requirement for an office is 3 to 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of office. And that's a conventional measure, but it's not related to actual demand. If we look at an ITE parking generation manual, the average occupancy rate is 2.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet rather than 4 spaces. So we could do a lot by reducing the minimum parking requirements. So minimum parking requirements result in often in free commuter parking, very little or no incentives to carpool, walk, bike, and taking transit. It also often facilitates unwalkable landscape with buildings in a sea of parking, which further encourages high drive-alone rates. So it's a reinforcing loop. And this reduces the demand for bike lanes and sidewalks and transit, and increases the street width and parking needs, and provides very little room for bikes, peds, and transit lanes. So it's important to connect the parking management to the TDM program, because it's hard to make a TDM program successful if you have too much parking available. And parking isn't free. This is the top level of a parking structure, and we're using $25,000 per space in just construction costs here. And this is typical value. The construction cost varies depending on type of facility. Surface lots are, say, $5,000 per space, above ground structure $25,000 and up towards $100,000 per space. Below ground, $35,000 and upwards. Genentech's construction costs are for surface lots about $10,000 per space, and above ground structure $35,000 per space. But then we don't only have construction costs that we need to think about. We also have land costs and operating and maintenance costs. If you're in a suburban location in a surface lot, it may be fairly inexpensive. It's, say, $80 per month to cover the costs associated with parking. But if you're in a central business district and a downtown, just the land cost in itself is very, very high, because you have high land costs and very low utilization of the space. So, and then you have the construction costs and the O&M on top of that. So that brings it to, say, $300 a month, which is $10 a day of, per parking space, just to cover the cost of that parking space. And the same, roughly the same cost if you have a central business district parking structure. These values are rough, but they give a picture of how much it actually costs per month to provide parking. General TDM outcomes, this is an interesting slide. It's a little bit hard to explain. So we have several objectives. So for instance, congestion reduction, road and parking savings, consumer savings, transport choice, road safety, environmental protection, efficient land use, and community livability. And if we continue to widen highways, the only thing we do is we potentially reduce congestion. But within a few years, latent demand will have, in most cases, eaten up this increased capacity. So it's a short-term fix. With fuel efficiency standards, it has a positive impact on environmental protection, but it doesn't do much on congestion reduction, road and parking savings, road safety, and efficient land use. We still have the vehicles, but they're more efficient when it comes to GHG emissions. TDM programs, on the other hand, can have positive impacts on all of these objectives. So that's a big takeaway from this. Let's see. So general TDM programs that we typically use can be divided into carrot programs, mixed programs, and stick programs. And the carrot programs are, for instance, our transit and shuttle improvements, pedestrian and cycling facilities, bike parking, shower and locker facilities, alternative work schedules, and the list goes on. In the mixed message or mixed strategy, we have parking management, traffic calming, which some people don't, and some groups of people don't prefer. And in the sticks category, we have parking pricing, for instance, and road pricing. And with that, I would like to see if we can do our second poll. Does your organization provide free parking? And right now, 40% voted and 70% yes. Let's see. I've got to give it a couple of seconds. Yeah, roughly 70% say that 75% say that there's free parking at their organization. And I think that's also very typical. And it's more common that if you're in a big city and downtown that you don't have free parking, and it may not even be any parking. There may not even be any parking in the building. So, but if you come out to further out in the suburbs and more rural areas, there usually very, very much available parking. And now I'm going to hand over to Nate to talk about the master plan effort.
Thanks, Jessica. So just to orient everyone, the map that we're showing is the San Francisco Bay Area. The red dot down in the center of the map is where Genentech is at. We're located on the southeast end of the San Francisco Peninsula, right above the San Francisco Airport. And so this is just an aerial shot to kind of orient you to the area that we're in. We're in an industrial area in what's considered the east of 101 area. South San Francisco is to the west of us, and then to the north is San Francisco. And so this next map that I'm showing shows the east of 101 area. So that's a big industrial zoned area, zoned for no residential. The city of South San Francisco is to the west side of 101, like I mentioned. The orange that's showing up on the map is the R&D overlay zone, which is what Genentech has. And that's the 10-year master plan that we currently are in. It was first originally adopted in 1995, went through 1995 to 2005. We updated it in 2006, so we're in about the 6th year of it at this point. So in 2006, you can see the campus here on orange. We were about 2.8 million square feet and about 6,500 employees on 125 acres. And when we updated the master plan, we updated it for about 6 million square feet with 13,000 employees and 200 acres. So the next slide I'm going to show you shows the Genentech campus with our leased properties as well. So we lease quite a bit of office space at the Gateway campus, which is in the top left corner of the slide, as well as in what we call the South campus on the bottom right corner of the slide. And then also you'll see the hatched area kind of in the center of the slide, and that shows our expansion area that we added to the master plan when we updated in 2006. And I'll talk a little bit more about the neighborhoods as we get into the next couple slides. So as I mentioned, we look at the campus in terms of neighborhoods. The green on the lower campus is what we consider our manufacturing area, and that's a fairly heavy density, large buildings down in that area. The center of the slide, we're going to show the upper campus, which is mainly our corporate center. So that is office space, used corporate functions. The mid-campus is a big research complex. It's about 1 million square feet of biotech lab space. And then the South campus is both biotech as well as small molecules research. And as I mentioned, the West campus is more warehouse space that's to be developed going forward. So just a couple quick slides on our public amenities and the other parts of our master plan that we looked at. So this slide shows our public amenities as well as the Greenway connections actually come up in the next slide. The green to the left, the right of the slide is actually our Bay Trail connection, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You see Grandview, which is kind of the main artery through our campus, and then the orange, which is sort of the very northern boundary of our campus.
Nate, could you make sure that you're speaking up and into the mic? Some people are having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry about that. Is that better?
I think so. all to the audience, it may be the phone connection, so you might want, if you're listening to him over your speakers, if you switch over to a phone, that might help for the audience.
Okay, great. I'll try and speak up a little bit too and see if that helps. So this slide actually shows the open space, and as I mentioned, on the right of the slide, you'll see the Bay Trail connection, and then we have a lot of internal circulations, which are going to come up on the next slide as well. But the campus was really planned with really great open space and green spaces. And as we see on the next slide, we see our pedestrian networks as well as street networks. And we really try and provide a lot of internal circulation paths for our employees. Like I mentioned, the Bay Trail on the far right of the slide, and then you'll see the kind of the khaki color loops that go through the campus, which are our internal circulation. Those are great for both pedestrian as well as our BikeShare program. And then if we look at parking, parking has been looked at a couple different ways on our campus. And what we finally settled on for the master plan was a neighborhood parking scheme where each neighborhood basically self-parks itself. So if you look at the West Campus, there's a parking structure plan kind of in the middle of the West Campus. Upper Campus is the same thing. We really wanted each neighborhood to be self-parked. We've looked at a couple different schemes. Originally, we were looking at more of a university style where there's perimeter parking and there's not really any cars allowed in the campus itself. And we really realized that that was not, for our employees, a really effective method. So we went with this neighborhood parking scheme. And then if we look at our negotiated parking ratios, so as Jessica mentioned, you know, they're typically 3 to 4 parking spaces per 1,000 gross square feet of area. South San Francisco, you see sometimes as high as 4.5 parking stalls per 1,000 gross square feet of area. And so we were able to negotiate our parking ratios down based on the TDM program that Dan is going to talk about a little bit later. So for office, we negotiated them down to about 2.75, lab about 1.4, manufacturing about 0.9, and warehouse about 0.5. And so right now we're looking at, we probably have a blended ratio of about 1.75 stalls per gross 1,000 square feet, which is pretty significantly different than what the city of South San Francisco would have required had we not done the master plan with the associated TDM component. So the outcomes of the master plan, where we were required to continue providing all of our basic TDM programs, they also wanted us to implement some sort of a parking cash out or incentive program. At the end of the 3-year period, monitoring would be performed, and we needed to be at least 30% mode shift. As I mentioned, the monitoring is every 3 years. And then if we didn't meet the 30% mode shift for the 3-year period, a fine would be implemented, and the proceeds from that fine would actually come back into our TDM program to beef it up a little bit. That was the way the code was written. So then if we start looking at parking cash out, for our campus, it wasn't really feasible to charge for parking. Our driveways and the way our campus was designed, it wasn't designed with long enough drives to allow for the stacking to get in and out of the parking for charging. So we wanted to offer a cash value for those that didn't drive. We also consider this kind of a part of the cafeteria-style benefits package. And then the federal law also in 2012 allowed for a free parking subsidy up to $240 per month, a transit subsidy up to $120 per month, $20 a month for the subsidy for bicyclists, and nothing for pedestrians. And then if we look at the price elasticity of parking demand, so this is something that we looked at as we were setting our rates. If you look at the left axis at 100% and offering no dollars, you're not going to entice anyone out. And if you're going all the way to the far right at $180, you're getting almost 65% of your people driving alone, or 35% willing to get out of their cars in terms of taking that parking incentive. And now we're going to turn it over to Dan, and Dan is going to talk about our TDM program.
Thank you, Nate. So again, my name is Dan McCoy. I lead up the Genentech Transportation Group, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of our TDM program. These are the main elements of our TDM or gRide program. gRide represents the brand that encompasses all of the services and incentives and marketing that we offer and that really describe the commute benefit package that we offer our employees. The marquee product in that portfolio is our GenenBus program. These are full-size motor coaches Wi-Fi enabled, and they're pretty tricked out and very comfortable commute mode option. We offer them from 57 communities throughout the Bay Area and BART and Caltrain. We also have an intra-campus DNA shuttle that really supports those employees that arrive at campus without their cars and facilitates face-to-face meetings and the general productivity of an employee during the day. Face-to-face meetings and cross-functional meetings and engagement are a really important part of Genentech's corporate culture. Nathan mentioned a little bit of our cash rewards program. We offer $4 a day typically for an alternative commute mode user. We also offer a pretty innovative driver incentive program, which is basically $4 per passenger per day, up to a maximum of 8 passengers, or $32 a day for that driver. It's really difficult in the TDM world often to find a driver for a van pool, for example, or someone who's willing to take 3, 4, 5 people in their car on a regular basis, which is a really productive and efficient commute mode to have a van pool or a car pool with 5 people. So we implemented this driver rewards program, and it's been pretty effective. We also have a $120 a month subsidy and preferred parking. An element here, Guaranteed Ride Home program, is an essential element of any well-balanced commute benefit program, or TDM program. Genentech obviously has a very robust program, but don't let that discourage you or give you the wrong impression. TDM programs can be rolled out at smaller companies, medium-sized companies, very inexpensively or even at no cost, and can have an impact at the margins. So, but Genentech has definitely taken it to the next level. And then just a couple more programs. BikeShare I'll get into a little bit more detail later. So the gRide program has been very successful in engaging our employees. That's been a really important part of the program. Folks, in California particularly, are very reluctant to give up their car. It's very difficult to earn a customer, and it's very easy to lose a customer in terms of when they've got a vehicle in their driveway or two, that they can easily jump in. So, we really wanted to go out there and really push our engagement efforts and develop the gRide brand as a very cool brand to be part of. The brand promises that we had in terms of it's the most rewarding commute, reliable commute, convenient, easy. These are really important elements. So we were very successful in getting a broad level of engagement from our 10,000 employees, 10,000 or so employees at the campus. So our Genentech program, I mentioned our marquee program. We focus these bus services on areas that do not have a viable public transit alternative, have longer and more arduous and costly commutes, and then other high-density neighborhoods in San Francisco. As the slide says, we have over 38 buses serving 27 communities with over 3,500 riders per day. We're basically running a small to medium-sized transit agency at Genentech. I'll also talk about some of our colleagues at Google and Yahoo and Apple in a bit in the context of these commuter buses that are really catching fire over here in the Bay Area. We mentioned bike sharing a little bit. We do have a bike share program at Genentech. Again, this facilitates inter-campus mobility for employees that arrive on campus without their cars. We also have people that drive in and use the bikes for lunchtime rides or fitness, or just like getting out of the office and going for a spin, going and visiting colleagues in another campus. It's been very successful. We went with a very structured B-cycle product. For various reasons, risk being one of them, and being able to control access to the bikes, and theft. Nathan, maybe you can confirm this, but in the 10 months that we've had it, well, since November 2010, we have not had a bike stolen.
Correct. We haven't had any bikes stolen at all. We've had one flat tire as well, so it's pretty good for the system.
Yeah. Which having no bikes stolen over that period of time is a miracle. I see Google bikes all the time in San Francisco. So, and they even found a Google bike down in LA one time.
And Dan and Nate, one thing that we should mention is that the topography of the campus that we have it's not really, it doesn't lend itself to walking and biking that much because there are significant, a hill in the middle, for instance, but people, the way the system has been set up, the biking occurs pretty much around the hill, right?
Correct. We leverage the bike, the Bay Trail, and some other pedestrian and bicycle facility improvements that we've included in our master plan. But yeah, we are definitely at a disadvantage from bike sharing perspective because there are some nasty hills over there. So again, I talked a little bit about our employee engagement activity. One of the key elements of a successful commute benefit program and getting someone to actually switch out of a drive-alone vehicle and into an alternative commute mode is walking them through it literally one-on-one. The marketing of a TDM program is very hands-on. It's very one-on-one personal communication. Logistics of transportation are very complicated sometimes to folks. People understand how to drive their car, but when you're talking about public transit or you're talking about catching a bus at a particular crossroads, people need to have an incredible amount of specific information, and they want to hear it directly from you. So we've done a lot in terms of making our information and our program available to our employees. Our webpage is a key element of that effort. It is our sort of one-stop shop for everything, gRide. We've really put a lot of time and effort to make information as easy to find and as digestible as possible. It's challenging because every single commuter has their own set of circumstances, their own demographics, their own, where they live. What are they single? Do they have family? Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they early risers? Do they like to work late? I mean, there's innumerable factors that impact and affect how a person is going to approach leaving their car at home and what sorts of alternatives would be viable for them and their particular lifestyle. So it's important to have a lot of information but easily accessible. This is how we track the gRide rewards program. We have an easy-to-use infographic calendar where people self-report which days they use a particular commute mode, and then they submit that calendar at the end of the month, and then their rewards for choosing those alternative commute modes shows up in their paycheck 2 weeks to a month later. So you get an idea of how we've tried to make it easy for people to report their rewards, and then we do some additional impact reporting, carbon footprint impact and money saved impact, VMTs, vehicle miles traveled, reduced impacts for the employee to see what their impacts have been, and also and then to roll those up program wide and to see how we all are doing. So I'm not going to read these slides. You can get we're on the honor code, and it's simple and easy. Again, getting to this, how you engage an employee, we've spent a lot of time, money, and effort in terms of building awareness of the program, building an understanding of how the program works, and then triggering action, triggering that, okay, I'm going to try it. And it takes a lot of thought and effort in that regard. So the gRide team, just to give you an idea of how, the kind of personnel resources that are required to run a program of this scope and scale, we have Nate is our outreach team. We have a 2-person operations team, which is managing our fleet of 55 buses. We have over 6,000 individual trips carried each day, system-wide, and then there's me. We have, obviously, we leverage a lot of outside resources in terms of transportation service providers. The buses that I've been describing, the intra-campus services, these are all outsourced services to vendors, charter bus vendors and other vendors. So we definitely leverage a lot of outsourced resources. So gRide today, we are meeting our 10-year master plan. Actually, we're outperforming our 10-year master plan. We're at 36%, and we are hoping to achieve 40%, if not this year, shortly into 2013. Again, over 3,000 employees engaged on a monthly basis. We've won some awards and been recognized as an innovator in this field, and we carry over 1.2 million riders in 2012. Again, running a small to medium-sized transit agency. One of the exciting things about gRide is that we are, later this summer, or actually probably midsummer, we are going to cross the 100 million mile threshold. Since November of 2006, when we launched the gRide program, we've been tracking how many VMTs we've reduced, and we are at about 94, 95 million miles right now. And we're going to have a big company-wide celebration marking that 100 million mile milestone. And we're all very proud of that. I think not only the team, but I think the company is proud of that, and the participants in gRide, and even those folks at the company that aren't participating in gRide. Quick sidebar, gRide is not anti-car. It's not about making people feel guilty about driving their car, because driving a single occupant vehicle is simply a reality for some people based on where they live and what their lifestyle is and what their constraints are. gRide is about introducing people to an alternative if it makes sense for them, and making it as rewarding and simple and convenient and reliable as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica, and she's going to talk a little bit about the monitoring that we are doing.
Yep. And as Dan just mentioned, Genentech is now at a 36% non-drive alone mode share, and that's pretty impressive. And the reason we know that is because Nelson Nygaard has helped Genentech over the last 5 or 6 years do mode split counts and parking occupancy counts. And the parking occupancy counts have been done during some years twice a year, some years once a year. But the mode split counts have been consistent with 2 counts every year. And what we've decided to do are Cordon counts. And the reason we did Cordon counts was because the city of South San Francisco required that when you do a transportation survey that you have a 100% response rate. And if we would do an online employee survey, it would be very, very hard for a company of 6,000 employees to get 100% response rate. So instead we've done Cordon counts, and that means that we count in different locations during certain time periods within the campus to capture how many people drive in, how many people carpool in, how many people walk and bike in, and how many people take different kinds of transit in. Oops, sorry. The surveys occur during peak morning hours to focus on the employee commute, so it's not focused on service vehicles. Those are discounted out of this analysis. And the data is collected over 3 consecutive weekdays to offset for bad weather and irregularities in travel patterns, etc. And surveys have been repeated in April and October each year for the longitudinal study. And the surveyors so far have actually been Genentech security staff, and roughly around 20 people are trained and utilized as surveyors by Nelson Nygaard staff. And then the same surveyors are used for both the Cordon counts and the parking counts. There are 13, and this has been adjusted over the last 6 years, but roughly 13 key Cordon count entrances that we count, and 3 transit locations to capture BART riders, Caltrain riders, and Genentbus commuters. And we tally all of the modes to the right in the slide. And we use tally sheets, so this can be done both low, not high-tech, very low-tech, but if we're doing this often, it may be a reason to go to a more high-tech approach. And the parking counts, in 2011, 41 parking zones were counted and 11,000 parking spaces were covered. And the surveys are conducted at 10 a.m. And each surveyor is assigned a series of adjacent parking zones to count. And we survey different types of parking, which you see on the right here. So outcomes of the monitoring program is that it allows for various performance measures to be analyzed. So mode share vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas emissions, and the single occupancy vehicle reduction, which is very important to the city. And it provides year-to-year comparison to checks for progress and benchmarking. The GHG analysis is constantly updated and refined over since 6 years ago. The methodology was a bit different and the assumptions were a bit different. So we keep going back to our old data to update it with comparable data so that we're actually comparing apples to apples. And with that, I'm handing over to Nate to talk about the actual impact.
Great, Jessica. Thank you. Oops. So if we start looking at the business drivers and impacts, the master plan and the capital expenditures associated with that, the lower parking ratios allow us to reduce the number of parking structures required in our master plan. And depending on which formula of the master plan we're talking about, it was somewhere between $75 and $150 million over the 10-year life cycle of the master plan in the analysis that we did. And then also the reduced number of parking stalls or reduced number of parking structures required allows us to use our land in more productive ways, more real estate for lab and manufacturing space, which really helps the company out. And then there's another element, which is the best places to work. So there's a lot of recruitment, retention, and quality of life issues that the program really helps to address. We get comments from employees that ride the Gen Bus that sometimes they're able to get back at least an hour a day with their families by the time that they gain on the Gen Bus, or that productivity that the Gen Bus allows them to have. And then it's also a differentiator for other Bay Area biotech companies. Bay Area talent pool is a pretty hard talent pool, and it takes a lot of incentives like this type of program to really gain, to get those employees to shift into your company. So if we look at, one second slide. There we go. So if we look at the productivity enabler, so we get about 10,000 Wi-Fi sessions per month on a Gen Bus, or on the Gen Bus fleet, which equates into about a $2 million gain in productivity over the year. And then our intra-campus shuttle, the DNA intra-campus shuttle, allows employees to have face-to-face meetings really easily. And then if we start looking at the carbon footprinting, we've had about a 12.5% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over the period of the program. And then gRide has eliminated about 63.4 million tons of CO2 since the program launched in 2006. So if we look at the measures, as we've mentioned already in the presentation, we look at mode split, we look at vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas reduction, parking, and then of course the financials. So looking at our mode split in 2006 to present, so 2006 is the lighter blue, and then present, which would have been last fall, is the darker blue. So when we started the program in 2006, we were at about a 74% drive alone. And in 2011, in October 2011, when this was last calculated, we were at about 64% drive alone. So that's a pretty good reduction in a period of 6 years. We look at the carpooling, and that's come down a little bit, and that mainly has to do with our providing more Gen Bus service into communities. A lot of people shift out of carpooling or van pooling into Gen Bus as soon as they have that service in their communities. And then also in the transit, you'll see that number has the Gen Bus service wrapped up in it. We didn't break it out differently for this slide. And then van pool and walk stay pretty consistently over the last 6 years. So if we look at the trends for starting on the top for drive alone, you'll see that trending down, and as you get closer to the kind of the 60% range, which is what we're trying to hit for drive alone, it gets a little bit flatter, and it's a little bit harder for each percentage point that we pick up to make that next percentage point, to shift that next group of people out of their car. And then on the bottom of the slide as well, you see the trending upward for the non-drive alone people. And again, it's kind of flattening out a little bit as we get closer to 40%. We're really trying to push towards 40%. And this summer with gas potentially going to $6 a gallon in California, that will definitely help us in terms of getting that last couple percentage points as we get to 40%. So if we look at vehicle miles traveled impacts, Genentech 2006, we were up a little bit over 200,000 miles, and Genentech 2010, we're at about, let's say, 175,000 miles. In comparison with San Mateo County, which is the county that we're in, is just up a little bit above 200,000 miles. So it shows that we're trending down a little bit, and we're also doing a lot better than the state of California as well as our neighboring counties. So if we look at greenhouse gas reductions, the impacts by year, starting in 2006, you'll see the bar that shows our total emissions. The red line coming down the slide is the emissions per employee in metric tons. And then the green line coming across the bottom of the bars is our number of employees. So if you look at our number of employees has stayed fairly constant. We've had a little bit of growth, but it's stayed pretty constant over the period that we're looking at. And then if you look at our total emissions, they've come down pretty significantly from 2006, as well as our emissions per employee have really come down since 2006 as well. And then if we look at our share of emissions by mode, we've got drive alone up on the top at close to 100%. And then two-person carpool is coming in next on the slide, as well as the Gen bus. And then as we continue down the slide, we've got Caltrain and BART on the very bottom. So as Jessica mentioned, Nelson Nygaard conducts parking audits or parking counts. And this slide shows it's kind of a heat map of our parking, the green being the least occupied and the dark red being the most occupied. And as you see, the lower campus has probably the highest parking occupancy, and that's partly because that part of the campus is really densely developed with only one parking structure. As you come up into the rest of campus, you see that it's pretty well green. One of the things that we've found as we've been 6 years into the master plan is that we're fairly overparked. We have a lot of surplus parking that we really don't need, which really tells us the program is working really well. Because in 2006, or actually a little bit before 2006, before we really started implementing the program, the campus in general was really tight for parking, and that was one of the biggest complaints that the facilities planning group had to deal with on a daily basis, was the complaint that there was no parking, or it was very difficult to find parking. And now it's sort of the opposite. There's tons of parking, and that's one of the least heard complaints for that group. So next, Dan is going to talk about the next steps for the program.
Thank you, Nate. So before I talk about the next steps for the program, I'll talk a little bit about peer benchmarking. And as some of you all, and I know you're from across the country, basically, you may have heard about, the emergence and the explosion of commute benefit program, and particularly corporate shuttle programs here in the Bay Area with marquee companies like Google and Apple and now Facebook, and some of these other companies are getting into the commuter shuttle, employer shuttle bus business. And Google is definitely, at this point, the leader in that effort. They've got a fleet about twice the size of ours, and they've made a very conscious and aggressive investment in this area. And it's really interesting to see how TDM is becoming much more of an accepted approach for companies, and there's various business drivers that are and business motivators depending on the particular business. For Google and Apple, clearly they're about recruitment and retention, and it's all about getting the best and brightest and keeping the best and brightest, who typically live in San Francisco, and both Apple and Google are all the way down in Silicon Valley. So they are carrying a lot of their employees back and forth, and they've set goals approaching 50% TDM, which is very, very aggressive. And it'll be interesting to see how and if and when they actually get there. And because Google and Apple and Genentech, for that matter, are investing in these programs, it's causing other smaller companies and other emerging companies to get into this business, to take commute benefit programs and TDM more seriously. Because if you're a small startup or you're even a medium-sized company in the tech business down in Cupertino or down in Mountain View and you don't have a bus running from the San Francisco, you're going to find it very, very difficult to recruit those best and brightest programmers from neighborhoods in San Francisco. It's just, it'd be near impossible. So you're starting to see some of these other companies getting into this space. So in terms of a next step for this business or the next step for this, in the TDM world here in the Bay Area, it's really, we're all sort of in friendly competition with each other to see who can really develop the best, most efficient, most tricked out, most attractive commute benefit program. Let's see. So I'm going to go to the next. I'll throw in a quick slide here in terms of that sort of friendly competition amongst the various programs here with Google and Apple and Yahoo. And just as a quick sidebar, our colleagues and I, our colleagues at these companies and I meet on a regular basis, and because we have common challenges in terms of liaisons with the city and vendor management and various things I won't get into. But one of the things that we did at Genentech that I think I'll say made some of our other partners a little jealous was we were the first company to run a 100% algae-derived biodiesel product in a bus. Other than the Navy, which had tested this fuel, we were the first private sector company to do so. And it was a very successful, proud moment for the program. And I think the Genentech community really had a lot of fun with it because, quite frankly, some of the technology and some of the techniques and processes that Genentech invented 35 years ago in terms of gene splicing and the rest of it were actually leveraged and utilized by Solazyme to create an algae that would produce a usable fuel at high volume. So I'm not going to read the slide, but I think that's one of the future elements of TDM and hopefully transportation in general is really being able to integrate alternative fuels and renewable fuels, not necessarily food-based renewable diesels and fuel, but really innovative diesels and fuel. It's going to be a game changer. Somebody's going to crack that nut, and Solazyme and some other companies are getting pretty darn close. So, what's next? Well, it's an interesting question for Genentech because, we're already outperforming our 10-year master plan. So one of the obvious questions from the corporate suite would be, well, why do we do more, if we're already exceeding our master plan goal? Well, part of the answer to that is that while the master plan and parking ratios and capital expense and agreeing to develop a TDM program in lieu of having to build all this extra parking, that was what the business driver that primed the pump. The corporate suite many years ago could really understand that kind of an equation. Why build concrete and rebar parking structures when you could build a lab on that same real estate and save money in the end? Well, that started the conversation. It primed the pump, but the program has really evolved into a best place to work program. Once we got the program in place, the corporate suite really realized and heard from the community at Genentech how with the visceral impact that these kinds of programs were having on our employee workforce, the recruitment impacts, the retention impacts, the productivity impacts, and the quality of life. Benefit programs and benefit packages are very important in the biotech field and in the tech field here in the Bay Area. As Nathan mentioned, talent is very, very tight, and it's not what you've invented today, it's what you're going to invent tomorrow that's really the most important in this business, and that's brain power. So getting the best and brightest is key, and when you have a benefit program that's impacting a person, an employee, every day, twice a day, and turning a 2-hour commute, a white-knuckle driving along commute, into a 2-hour, 1.5-hour in the carpool lane bus ride where you've got Wi-Fi and a comfortable seat and you're able to liaise with some of your colleagues and meet people and have that kind of experience, or even sleep, which is certainly fine as well. That's a game changer right there. And the corporate suite has really has really begun to realize that, and it's becoming ingrained there. So the next question, in terms of what next, is renegotiating parking ratios. So, it might be sort of a back to the future sort of experience here at Genentech. While parking really primed the pump for the program's launch, we may be going back to parking as the reason to even invest further and renegotiate our parking ratios down from what they are, and extend those capital savings. So we're in a position to do that. We're outperforming the master plan by 6 points already. If we get up to the 40% ratio, we have a very strong argument to make with the city that, why are you forcing us to build this parking when we don't need it? Short and medium distance commutes. So, if we are going to get into the 40% range or even beyond, we're really going to need to crack that short and medium distance commute market, which is the most difficult market to penetrate from a TDM perspective. When you're offering a service like a GenNBus program focused in an area that has long, arduous, costly commutes and does not have a viable transit alternative, the competitive advantage you have offering a bus service in that corridor is clear. When you're talking about a person who lives 5 miles or 10 miles from the campus and they can use surface streets or their commute is less than 15 minutes or 20 minutes, offering a bus program to compete with a drive-alone vehicle in that kind of a market is very expensive. You have to run a lot of buses with a lot of frequency, and it's very challenging. So really your only viable alternative commute mode to offer them is those self-formed carpools and biking. And getting people to bike in large numbers is challenging, as you can all imagine. And carpooling is also a tougher nut to crack. So, but Nathan and I and our team are looking at new and better and innovative ways to combine social networking with ride matching, essentially. We have brought in a Zimride, which is a new rideshare tool and rideshare company that's, again, trying to crack that nut with the linkage between social networking and ride sharing. So we'll see how that goes. Efficiency as our program grows is obviously an ongoing challenge. Every dollar we spend on GenNBus and every dollar that we spend on the TDM gRide program is a dollar that we could spend developing a new molecule that could save lives. And so we're competing for dollars in that kind of a context. So while we have a lot of important business drivers and really valuable outcomes that gRide generates, it's still in the context and in the conversation of, well, we could be saving lives with this money. So,
but that's also another reason to have good performance measures so that you can back up your and not only with quantitative but with qualitative data, focus group input and surveys, just to see how people enjoy the program, right?
Absolutely. And last, and interestingly, we've got carbon impacts. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Genentech, Genentech was purchased by Roche, which is a Swiss company, a couple of years ago. And Roche is one of, if not the most aggressive European company in the sustainability area. They're very committed to sustainability. It's a privately held company, and the family that owns Roche is, they take this very personally. So sustainability has become an important business driver for the Genentech gRide program, even though we de-emphasized it as a reason why someone should join gRide, which is a longer conversation. But anyway, carbon footprint is obviously going to continue to be an important business driver, along with capital, parking ratios, and the best place to work, productivity, retention, and recruitment. So with that, I think we're opening it up to question Q&A.
Okay, the questions have started coming in. First question is, can you share any operating costs associated with the commuter bus and campus shuttles?
Nate, I'll go ahead and take that. Yes, I can. A commuter shuttle, a GenNBus, costs in the order of $119 per hour to operate. with a minimum of 8 hours a day. And then, you know, the $4 rewards and those other kind of programs just roll up. You know, you can easily calculate how much per employee based on an average 13 commuter days per month, which is what our average is, 12 to 13.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, did Genentech ever consider building housing on the campus to further reduce VMT?
Nathan, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, Jen, I'll take that one. So the ISO 101 area that we're in is a fairly heavily contaminated industrial zone. It was originally really heavy industry. There were steel mills, there was Liberty ships built out there. So we can't have any housing in the ISO 101 area. So that's something that we never considered as we were doing the master planning process.
One tag on to that is that I have heard of a few companies that have developed housing subsidies, loan modifications, well, not modifications, but the housing subsidies for employees that decide to live within a certain radius of the campus. So that's an innovative element of TDM, of a TDM program, but we do not currently offer that.
And I think this is also something that's becoming more and more common in other office campuses where we have a big business that realize that they have a lot of land or parking lots, for instance, that these can be converted into housing. So it's a really good strategy to keep in if it's possible for your community and site.
Okay. Next question. Is avoidance of drive-alone mode resulting in higher employee productivity measured? Is that measured in any output metrics or dollars?
Yeah, I think we showed that one.
Nate, you can tag on in terms of the Cordon count, but you know, we do sort of, well, let me phrase it this way. The gRide's impacts, both in a productivity sense and in the recruitment, retention, quality of life, are very qualitative, and it's hard to develop techniques and methodologies to quantify those impacts. We have, you know, begun to scrape that, to peel that onion in terms of the productivity numbers. We are based on our back of the envelope analysis and counting how many Wi-Fi sessions we have on the Genentech bus, and assuming that only 50% of those Wi-Fi sessions are in fact Genentech related, you come up with a number of $2 million per year, which is a significant number, and that's a very, very conservative number. Even if you're talking about an individual who's sleeping for an hour and a half on the way to work, you know, there is a productivity impact in terms of their ability to get to work when they arrive, you know, refreshed, if you will. To measure that is very challenging. Nate, maybe you want to talk a little bit about Cordon, about conjoint study.
So basically, we've looked at this, and really the only way to get an accurate measurement is to do a conjoint analysis, and that's something we've been kind of trying to do. It's a little bit difficult to get management approval to do that high level of a study because we need to get all 12,000 employees to participate in the study. So that's one of the reasons that it hasn't been done yet, but we keep pushing forward to try and get a conjoint analysis so we can get a really accurate measure of that productivity.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Dan. Next question. Did you calculate the trips from home to bus stops in terms of mode and impact?
I wish I could respond to that. Nate, do you know?
We're using averages basically that were produced by MTC. We haven't been able to do that part of the calculation, and again, that's really heavy surveying that we typically tend not to try and do at Genentech. There's a lot of survey fatigue at Genentech in terms of employees feeling like they're bombarded. So that's not a part of the onion we've tried to peel yet, although we do have some averages that we use for the Bay Area in terms of calculating that.
Yeah, and that's right. And for Genentech bus, you have more accurate numbers that are more based on Genentech's performance rather than regional, I believe, right?
Well, I'll add a little bit to that. I mean, there's a number of things wrapped up in that question. In terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, we do factor, there's different emissions factors for the various commute modes that a person uses. For example, Caltrain is a much dirtier commute mode than BART.
Caltrain is a diesel run,
Yes.
very heavy locomotive.
Yeah, it's a heavy rail diesel locomotive commute service here in the Bay Area. And so we do factor in the emissions factor of the commute mode, and that is all rolled up into our greenhouse report. And we also, so we do that for sure. And then in terms of VMTs, the VMTs are based on home address location. So that's a pretty granular number, and we get a pretty good number in terms of where a person lives and how many VMTs they personally are reducing in a particular day, and then roll that up to program-wide.
And you can do this in different ways, and the most accurate is to do a travel diary of all your employees or a campus population, for instance. But it's very time-consuming, and it's hard to get a high response rate on surveys like that. So here for Genentech, to keep it simple yet accurate on a higher level, it was decided to go with the Cordon count and average GHG emissions for the different types of modes to campus.
Thank you. Were there any interest in expanding the gRide service to non-employees for a profit reason? Or is Genentech planning on expanding to other markets?
So we do offer our service to our contractors. Those are employees who are working for vendors that are supporting Genentech. Because of IRS rules, we have to charge contractors a nominal fee per trip per day, but they are not eligible to participate in any of the rewards programs for various reasons, co-employment being the main one there. In terms of partnering with neighboring companies, we actually have the BART and Caltrain service that we offer, which carries about 1,500 riders per day, is in fact a consortium made up of Genentech and the Gateway Property Owners Association. So those buses have employees from Genentech and all the neighboring employees along the Gateway Boulevard. So there's mixed services in that sense.
And that portion of the last mile, is it 10 minutes to Caltrain and 15 minutes to Glen Park? Or?
Yeah, it's about 10 to 12 minutes to Millbrae and about 18 minutes to Glen Park, BART.
Yeah. So that one can be more easily shared between different users. But again, none of these companies want to be a shuttle provider. The goal of all of these companies are other. For instance, Genentech is biotech, Google is everything that they do. But so the shuttle program, it's not. I don't think the companies are looking to expand their programs to start charging other people to ride their services. It's probably the opposite, that you want to, you provide the service for as an employee benefit, but it's not something that you gain any money from.
An interesting tangent to that, or addition to that, is that some of the cities and some of the comments in various newsletter articles and neighborhood blogs have suggested and or described why aren't the Google and Apple and programs more open to the public, or why don't Apple and Google share buses and therefore reduce the number of buses that are operating? It really doesn't work. It wouldn't work because of what Jessica just described. You've got, you can imagine the difficulty of having a Google employee sitting next to an Apple employee, talking about or, having company-sensitive information on their laptops in front of them. So that's a non-starter right there. And some of the peak period buses that Apple and Google and Genentech are running are packed. So we really don't have room to carry anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Where do you pick up your employees? Is it?
All over the place. We our Genent bus stops are typically from public park and ride lots. We also lease private parking from either vacant office parks or from vacant land. An Elks Club, for example, is another area that we, one of our vendors, one of our parking leasers. We, in the city, in the central business district here in San Francisco, we use public bus stops. At this time, it's becoming a challenge to continue to do that here in San Francisco because the operational footprint of Genentech, Apple, Google is just growing and growing and growing, and we are starting to have some impact on the throughput and efficient operation of the public transit partners that we work with.
And it should be mentioned that it's not only the big regional employers. There are, in downtown San Francisco, there are several local circulators and institutions that provide shuttle service between different campuses and from Caltrain and BART. And so it's not only the big regional employers, and the city is working, city and county are working closely with the employers and the institutions to try to figure out a way to make sure that the benefits are recognized and that some of the issues with conflicts at certain locations are resolved. So that's becoming a high priority for everyone.
Okay. What is your annual budget to provide the services?
The annual budget is big. We'll leave it at that. It's a significant investment on the part of Genentech.
Okay. To date, has there been net economic gain or loss associated with this specific program?
Could you repeat the question?
Has there been a net economic gain or loss associated with the gRide program?
Well, if you look at the parking that we would have otherwise had to build, had we not agreed to lower parking ratios and the master plan goal of 30%, there have been net gains. We have invested a significant amount of money over the years in the gRide program, and it depends on your build-out scenario in the master plan, but under the master plan scenario that you would have built out the most square footage and you would have had to build the most parking, we definitely are saving money through the implementation of the gRide program.
And that's, again, where it comes in and becomes important to have the performance or the benchmarking so that you can show the city or other organizations or agencies that we can further reduce our parking ratios here because we don't generate as much parking as may be thought or expected.
And that's just factoring in the dollars in, dollars out. I mean, if you go with the parking scenario where you just build parking and you don't develop a TDM program, all you get is parking garages that don't do you any good at all. If you agree to an aggressive TDM goal and you lower your parking ratios, then the money that you're investing in the TDM program brings you benefits, that you can also factor into that equation, that net. Yeah. Again, the recruitment, retention, productivity.
And also congestion, just on the big 101, for instance, with all of these shuttle vehicles replacing thousands of vehicles or cars a day, it does have an impact both on locally within certain San Francisco neighborhoods, but also on the regional level.
Great. What do your stockholders think about this program?
I couldn't say. Roche was purchased Genentech was purchased by Roche, which is a privately held company. So we don't really have stockholders in the traditional sense. But I can talk a bit about how the corporate suite views the program. And we had a slide in a previous version that showed the ongoing and increasing investment in the TDM program, and I'll just speak to that slide, that since the launch of the program, our budget has increased threefold at least. And that's in a period. I don't think that there is a program that has increased that fast at Genentech that isn't a new molecule. Yeah. So the corporate suite has made a significant investment and repeated investment over the past 5 years in the TDM program.
Okay. What is the telework percentage of employees?
What's the average age of the employee?
No, the percentage of employees telecommuting.
Oh, telecommuting.
So, Nate, you want to talk a little bit about telecommuting?
Sure. So basically, telecommuting at Genentech has been something, because so many employees are lab-based, it's not a really endorsed program. It usually, the program is left up to managers to implement or to manage. So from a gRide perspective, we haven't really included that in our program or our system, and also because gRide was really founded to reduce parking or the demand for parking or parking spaces, and by having someone telecommute at that point when the program was designed really didn't alleviate a parking space, even though that person wasn't on campus. So telecommuting has been kind of a sensitive issue. I would say, that again, if we could ever do a conjoined analysis, that would be another great question to add into our conjoined analysis to really get into how many people are telecommuting on a daily basis.
It really comes down to a corporate culture issue around telecommuting. Again, as Nate said, there's so many of our most important employees, and all of our employees are important, but we are a research company and we are a science-based company, and we really value our scientists, and they are lab-based. I mean, they have to come to work and they work long hours, and they're at their lab tables. And then to have a robust or aggressive telecommuting program that allowed G&A and other support functions to not come to work would be challenging from a corporate culture perspective.
Thank you. The 64% of employees that do not participate in gRide, did they share with you why they did not choose, or did you ever get any response from them?
Nate, you want to talk about focus groups?
Sure. So we've looked at this in terms of focus groups. That was the best way that we've been able to kind of dive into this. And you have a variety of reasons why people aren't participating. You have some people that just like their car. You have some people that just like to drive. You have some people that really think, public transportation is icky. Some of those barriers we've been able to break through. Some of them we haven't been able to. Like, for instance, the people that have a really nice BMW and they like to drive their BMW, you're never probably going to break through to that person. No matter how nice or plush you make the program, that person still wants to be in their car. We've broken down some of the barriers by having programs like car share on campus. That was one of the things early on in the program. We were getting feedback from employees that, like, what happens if I need to run to a doctor's appointment at, midday, or I need to go to a meeting in San Francisco. So we've implemented programs basically to kind of counteract places where employees, gave us a reason why they had to have their car on campus. So kind of, I think the biggest piece are, the people that like to drive, the people where it's a really difficult or arduous commute and there isn't a Genentech service there yet. Typically those are lower density communities or communities that are further out in the East Bay, maybe towards Sacramento or out towards Livermore, things like that. So that's basically, I think, kind of the easiest way to explain that anyway.
Another tough market to crack is young parents, or parents with young children. There's a number of employees. At Genentech, our average employee is a little bit older than your Google and your Apple, and they tend to have children and be married much at a higher percentage. So we have a lot of young families at Genentech, and when you have a child and you're having to deal with daycare or school or what have you, it's just very, very difficult to adopt an alternative commute mode. I can't tell you how many requests we've had to allow children on the Genent buses, and you can imagine, all the problems that brings up. So we have not been able to integrate supporting young parents bringing their children either to a Genentech daycare facility or to other daycare facilities.
Thank you. Do you have any information regarding commute time changes for Genentech bus users?
So I think I'm not totally understanding your question, but when someone adopts a Genentech Commute as a commute alternative, they are in some cases sacrificing schedule flexibility. And some of our routes do have headways of even 12 minutes, for example, going to BART, or for Cupertino route, you have 5 or 6 options in the morning and 5 or 6 options in the afternoon to get home. If you're in Vacaville, you only have 2. There are other communities where you only have 1 option in the morning and 1 option in the afternoon. So in that sense, you are sacrificing schedule flexibility. But as a corporate culture, we have tried to instill, as part of the gRide program, flexibility for managers to allow employees to leave at a particular time, even if it's a little bit earlier than 5. Some of our buses actually leave at 4 p.m. They arrive at 7 a.m., but they leave at 4 p.m. for a fixed 8-hour day. That's typically for those long commutes that if you don't get in before 7 or you don't leave before 4, your commute doubles in duration because of the traffic. So there is a sacrifice in terms of schedule flexibility, but this sacrifice is supported by the corporate culture and makes a lot of sense to the employee and just to the system operation because of traffic patterns and the timing of congestion peaks.
And then the big thing is, of course, if you don't drive and you're on the shuttle, you can work efficiently that full 40 minutes or an hour and a half if you want to, if that's what you prefer to do. So for those commuters who do end up working 2 or 3 hours on the bus a day, it's a huge savings in time.
Great. Next question is, have you reached out or partnered with the city at all to improve transit service, bike facilities, etc., that serve your campus?
The City of South San Francisco provides last mile shuttle through from Caltrain, right? Or it's not the city; it's the county that does that. So it's not the last mile shuttle is probably the best tool. I don't know what number of people live in the city of South San Francisco and could get on a bus.
Well, Nate, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how our 10-year master plan efforts are integrated with the city's overall efforts and how we work with them in terms of their planning process and their infrastructure plans.
Sure, Dan, thank you. So basically there were some outcomes of our master plan that I didn't discuss that were more structurally related. So one of the things is that we need to install bike lanes on Forbes Boulevard. So that was the real busy street that I was talking about. So installing bike lanes, upgrading our Bay Trail. So there are components that were required by the city that we partnered with as we built out our master plan to integrate with their master plan to provide those additional amenities for the community as well as for Genentech.
And Nate, just to add to that, we're currently working with Genentech on a bike master plan, right?
Right.
So
Correct,
yeah, so looking at both the BikeShare usage, where to put new locations, but also where to provide new just general racks and storage facilities for bikes. Genentech has great shower facilities and locker facilities, and the maintenance that comes with that, and so all of this is being investigated right now and analyzed, and also where to provide additional links that are not only for bikes but for pedestrians as well. Also to the region, so outside of the campus, looking even a bit towards San Francisco and south, trying to fix the bike network.
Okay. Thank you. Next question is, why are you finding it necessary or difficult to negotiate parking ratios with the city of San Francisco? Dr. Donald Shoup introduced his book, The High Cost of Free Parking, at the 2005 APA convention in San Francisco. Do you find
Nathan, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. So I think a lot of it just has to get back with the mentality of the Planning Commission as well as the City Council in South San Francisco. And, you know, I think especially because South San Francisco used to be a very industrial, you know, union, truck-oriented. There was a lot of freight companies, things like that. So I think a lot of it is just a mentality and not necessarily the level of education, but just that the Planning Commission and the City Council haven't really come forward to really embrace the newer philosophies in terms of lower parking or things like that. I think they're still looking at the traditional models, as well as there's a lot of developers around us that, you know, are asking for those really high parking ratios because they find it easier to lease those properties because those developers are mixed companies. That, you know, it's difficult to provide TDM programs. So I think those are kind of the basic reasons behind it.
Thank you. Can you recommend a public agency, like how can a public agency incentivize reductions in parking and increase in alternative modes of transportation?
One of the big things is to look at minimum parking requirements and adjust those, tailor those, or even eliminate those for in districts where it makes sense. Just because you remove minimum parking requirements, it doesn't mean that you remove parking, because the market will decide how much parking should be provided. Right now, the minimum parking requirements that we have around the country are too high in many locations, and many cities in special districts are now reducing minimum parking requirements and implementing maximum parking requirements. But on top of that, unbundling the cost of parking from the cost of housing or cost of renting or leasing space is important, and requiring TDM programs as part of a new development, transit subsidies and other incentives for people to get out of the car. Bike parking and bike locker facilities are also important, and this, instead of having the bike parking linked to the minimum parking requirement, so the more parking you have to provide, the more bike parking you provide, that doesn't really make sense. Instead, it should be the bike parking should be, they should have their own ratios, and they should be linked to residential units or square footage of the commercial space. So those are just a few things that cities can do when it comes to their own zoning. And then on a regional level, I think it's a lot about attitude and information, education, and encouragement to get the change through the regional agencies down to the cities and into developers' minds, all of that.
Great. Next question is, do you have any automated parking garages?
Nate, are you talking about in terms of the auto stacking garages where you drive the car in? I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. No, all of our parking structures are basically, they're built with speed ramps. The traditional parking structure layout, we chose to go with speed ramps because we want our employees to circulate in and out in a very effective manner, even though we could get more parking if we were doing parked on ramp. But basically, we haven't looked at automated just because the cost is so high, and because we're so overparked at this point, it's not something that we would probably consider in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Like after implementation of the gRide program, did you get some of the parking spaces back? I mean, did any of the parking spaces get empty and underutilized?
Well, I guess I read that question as, did we free up enough parking space to repurpose a particular area or a particular chunk of real estate? And you know, Nate, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. But conceptually, yes. I mean, we have not built. Well, actually, we have plans to build on top of a parking lot right now. But Nate, maybe you could talk a little bit more educated about it.
Yeah, so basically we're so overparked right now. We have about 4,000 stalls that are not utilized at all. And our planning group is looking at the next set of office buildings that come online, renegotiating with the city to try and get the ratios down a little bit again so we don't have to build a parking structure as we bring the next set of office buildings online. So that's an ongoing negotiation. But we feel because the program has been so successful that we definitely have the traction and the leverage to negotiate with the city to get those ratios to come down a little bit further and not build the associated parking that comes with these next couple office buildings.
All right, guys, we are at 2:30, so we'll have to end the question and answer session here. If we didn't get to your question, you can feel free to email Jessica, Nate, or Dan. I'm sure they'll be happy to field any questions. And just want to say thank you, Jessica, Nate, Dan, and also Madhu for moderating our session today. And for the attendees who are still with us, I'm going to go over how to log your CM credits in just a moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, well, for those of you who are still with us, to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM and select today's date, which is Friday, April 20th, and then select today's webcast, which was Genentech, Your Commute Just Became Easier. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. Also, we are recording today's session, and you will be able to find a recording of this webcast along with a PDF of the presentation at www.utah-apa.org/webcast-archive. And this does conclude today's session, and I want to thank everyone again for attending.
Thank you.